Welcome back to a special episode of Red, White, and Weekly. I've wanted to do this special episode since beginning my project. I have entitled this episode, Liberty in the Shadows, the Mission of the Sons of Liberty. They were the impetus behind the grassroots effort of the revolution. I believe without these men, the revolution may not have happened at all. So, what do you call a group of determined men meeting by candlelight in smoky taverns throughout the revolution? They burned the midnight oil to shape the fate of a nation. They wrote under false names. They published underground papers. They sabotaged government property, and they provoked mobs into action. In another time, they might be called radicals. In 1760s Boston, they were called something else, the Sons of Liberty. Their mission wasn't wealth, wasn't fame. It was liberty, pure and simple. And for that liberty, they risked everything. Boston in the 1760s was more than just a port town. It was a pressure cooker. British troops marched its cobbled streets. Tax collectors would knock on your door, and the Crown's grip tightened with every new act. Enter two men, three actually. Sam Adams, a failed brewer with a blazing intellect and a gift for stirring words. John Hancock was Boston's richest merchant. He wrapped himself in fine clothing, yet he had the heart of a rebel. Adams had the fire, Hancock the fortune. Together, they sparked a revolution. What were they fighting against? Well, it wasn't just about tea. It was about power without consent. After the French and Indian War, Britain passed and levied a series of taxes on the colonies. There was the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, and the Tea Act, and colonists yet had no seat in Parliament. So, no taxation without representation was not just a slogan. It was a line drawn in the sand. So the Sons of Liberty fought back with words, with humor, and when needed, with force. The Sons of Liberty were not just a club. They were a secret network, a matrix stretching from Boston to Charleston. They used code names, invisible ink, and backroom meetings. They built liberty poles in public places and squares. They published underground papers and organized protests. They staged mock funerals for liberty, yet were real threats to British loyalists. Behind the drama, however, was real intent to organize resistance and stir the soul of a people. Sam Adams was the philosopher of rebellion. He believed liberty was a natural right, a right God-given, not king-granted. He organized committees of correspondence and fueled the minds of patriots with his words. John Hancock, with his silk and his silver, stood as a symbol of wealth turned inward and toward the revolution. He paid for resistance efforts, funded much-needed militia, and became the face of the respectable rebellion. Adams lit the fire. Hancock gave it the fuel. What did they achieve? Well, the Stamp Act protests shook Parliament. The Boston Tea Party humiliated the Crown. The committees of correspondence, Adams' brainchild, gave the colonies a united voice. They didn't just oppose tyranny. They laid the groundwork for independence. This was a dangerous game that they played. The Crown wanted them silenced. In 1775, General Gage had orders to arrest both Adams and Hancock, dead or alive. Episode 0, I touch on this. It was entitled Setting the Stage. This is why Paul Revere's ride mattered. It wasn't just a warning about British troops. It was a specific warning to them, the Sons of Liberty. This is a stanza from a poem entitled The Bloody Massacre. It was written by Paul Revere, the third man of the Sons of Liberty I alluded to earlier. If scalding drops from rage from anguish wrung, if speechless sorrow laboring for a tongue, or if a weeping world cannot appease the plaintive ghosts of victims such as these, the patriots' copious tears for each are shed, a glorious tribute which embalms the dead. Liberty to the sons wasn't just a theory, it was a risk worth dying for. Though the fires they lit burned brightest before Lexington and Concord and Boston, their legacy carried throughout the war. Adams helped shape Massachusetts government and stood firm in Congress. Hancock became president of the Continental Congress, and later he was governor of Massachusetts. They lived to see the country they once conspired to create. Their names, once whispered in secret, now ring through history. History does remember their names: Paul Revere, John Hancock, Samuel Adams. Liberty remembers their courage. I'm Kelly Haven. Thank you for joining me for this special episode about the Sons of Liberty. I'll see you Sunday. God bless you and the United States of America. See you then.